The last hours of the night shift always reveal something in hospitals. The corridors go quiet, the sounds of the machines echo sporadically in the rooms, the lights at the nurses' station go dim, and if you listen carefully, the sentences that people never say seem to be written only on the walls. Emily Haynes's last shift began on such a night, but for her, this night was not just another one of the others. It was perhaps the moment when everything began, and no one knew that Emily would be missing the next morning. Emily was 27, quiet but observant. Her colleagues described her as sweetly quiet. She always had a reserved smile on her face, but her eyes were extremely attentive. She understood people not by their speech but by their posture, and she often connected with the quietest patients the most. When she entered the hospital at 7 that night, she pulled her black hair back in a way that would not get tangled and had her station card scanned in her old but clean uniform. There was a short delay when she touched the fingerprint system. The system jammed, then opened. "Is this your last shift?" Brad, the security guard, said with his usual playful air. Emily smiled. "It feels like the last." Brad paused for a moment, then laughed. But Emily didn't laugh. She was on duty that night on the 7th floor, the cardiology ward, the place where patients with hearts and those with burdens on their hearts met. Emily liked this floor because it was quiet, but something was different tonight. The lights flickered differently in the rooms. There were missing names on the shift schedule. In one patient room, she noticed a chair facing the wall that didn't normally exist. And at 7:30, for the first time, her heart sank. She took notes throughout the night. The patients' blood pressures, their breathing patterns, their morphine doses. Everything was the same, but what wasn't the same was the inside of people's eyes. Mr. Larkin, 84, didn't let go of her hand that night. "Today was a strange day," he said. "Why?" "I don't know, but it was like there was someone else in the room. When I closed my eyes, I felt a hand holding my heart." Emily didn't say anything, but she ran her hand over her chest as she walked back to the nurses' station. When it was 2 a.m., there was no one in the hallways anymore. The other nurse, Annie, had left after saying she was going to the bathroom, but she hadn't returned. Emily waited for her for a while, then she got up and walked away from the station. She went into the empty room, and then she saw it. The window in the room was open, the curtain was swinging out, a pen on the floor, and a dried handprint on the wall. This was not an ordinary night. But Emily just experienced this awareness. She didn't say anything, because she had been keeping things bottled up in this hospital for years, and she had no more strength to stand it. Dear viewer, sometimes a person's silence is louder than their shouting. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt they are about to leave? Write in the comments and subscribe. Because this channel doesn't just tell about what happened, it also tells about losses. Emily's shift ended at 7:10 a.m., but the exit system had not been entered. When the new nurse who came on shift that morning did not see Emily at the station, she went through each room one by one. She was nowhere to be found. The restroom? Empty. The locker room? Locked. The second elevator? Out of service. Emily Haynes was not there. Her file was there. Her uniform was in the spare locker, but her phone had been left in a corner on silent. And for the first time that morning, the hospital felt cold instead of warm. The incident was reported to the police. The camera footage was reviewed, but the footage between 3:14 a.m. and 6:42 a.m. was missing. It was as if the system had forgotten only the hours Emily had disappeared. But what was really strange was the notebook found in the closet in her room, a small notebook, worn. On the cover was a single word, heart, and on the first page, this sentence, "Don't call me. If you're reading this, you're not alone anymore." A person is more hurt when they don't lose someone, but when they don't know why they left. Emily Haynes's disappearance became not just a file for those around her, but an incomplete sentence. None of them knew the ending, because no one had listened to her story completely. When her notebook was left on the table, turning the pages was not an investigation but an examination of conscience. Detective Karen Woods hesitated even as she opened that notebook, as if she were entering someone's privacy without their consent. But sometimes the way to find someone starts where they remain silent. The cover of the notebook still bore Emily's fingerprints, and what was written inside weren't just words. They were the whispers of a woman's inner world seeping out of her during the most fragile hours of the night. There was something striking about the first pages. Most of the sentences were unstarted. They were left unfinished, as if Emily was fighting herself in every line. It's 3:14. Every night something changes. People are sleeping, but someone wakes up. I don't know who, but they're watching me. Karen put her hand on the notebook. 3:14, she muttered. That's the minute the gap in the security footage begins. The second page was even more depressing. The night shift is a burden, but this is something else. There's not a physical pain in my heart, but a historical one, as if something in this building has been hiding for years. People aren't talking, but there's a mark in their gazes. Karen stared at a word just below the text. Silenced. That word wasn't silenced. Darker, more passive, deeper, like someone silenced by someone else. Dear viewer, have you ever encountered a feeling that can't be put into words? A moment when you had to silence not only the writer but yourself as well? Write in the comments, subscribe. Because this story is not just about what happened. For those who ask the question, why did she stay silent? Karen couldn't close the notebook. She wasn't thinking about its content, but its impact. Because the lines weren't just about Emily, they were also showing her herself. Long working hours, cold reports, those years when she had to always remain professional. And one day she realized that she had buried her own voice in the notebook. She went back to the hospital staff. This time she asked her questions differently. Did Emily trust you? Did she ever have anyone close to her here? Where would you be at 3:14 at night? But one of the most striking answers came from the silent security guard, Harris. Sometimes Emily would go out to the station at night, as if she was waiting for someone, but someone who never came. Karen froze. Have you thought about who it was? Harris bowed his head. Maybe herself, maybe her past. Towards the end of the notebook, Emily's writing became more erratic. Words slanted, some lines were underlined, but she hadn't put it down. She hadn't put that pen down. This isn't just a hospital. Forgotten people live in these walls. Room 721. No patients are visible, but every night someone breathes. I can hear them. Karen examined the room. The file said, Room 721 had last been used 3 weeks ago, but there was no daily cleaning entry in the registration system. The first thing she felt when she stepped into the room was stillness. You know right away that a place isn't empty, it's abandoned. Because abandonment is different from silence. Something has happened there, and nothing is happening anymore. Karen touched the edge of the bed. The fabric is cool, the pillow crushed, a small piece of paper tucked away in the drawer. One sentence, I didn't belong in this room. Dear viewer, when a person is lost, sometimes the place they go is not another city, not another country. Sometimes it is within themselves. Have you ever felt someone's presence in the walls? When they were gone, did it feel like there was one less room? Write in the comments. Because this story touches on the missing parts of not just one woman, but all of us. That night, for the first time, Karen saw Emily not just as a lost nurse, but as someone trying to survive, and maybe someone asking for help. The last page of the notebook, it was blank, but there was a line underneath, in red pencil. The fingerprint had dried slightly, as if she had left the last word unwritten, but there was one word, in pencil, very faint. Nobody saw, but I was there. Some people don't really disappear, they just quietly cut off contact with the world. Even though Emily Haynes' notebook seemed closed, there was still a missing pulse behind the words. Detective Karen Woods felt it as she walked through the back corridors of the hospital that morning. Everything was in place, the files, the reports, the camera footage. But Emily, wasn't there. And the sound of her absence was very loud. Karen put the notebook in her bag. She slowed her pace. She had known that something had always been missing throughout the investigation, but now she knew that something missing wasn't just information, it was emotion. What was she really looking for when she went looking for Emily? The truth? Or a part of herself she had forgotten years ago? That day, she made a decision. She would go back to room 721, but this time she wouldn't be alone. She and the two nurses from the night shift would stay in the room during the hours Emily disappeared. They wanted to relive that hour they couldn't make sense of. 3:14, night came. The corridors fell silent again. The routine continued. The intermittent beeps of the heart monitors, the dim flicker of the lights, and then 3:13. All three of them were silent in room 721. No one spoke. Even their breathing slowed. And at 3:14, something happened. A light breeze from the window stirred the curtain. The pen on the table rolled, and the drawer they were sure was closed opened. A piece of notebook fell out. Half a page, torn. A spot of dry blood smeared the edge, but it was legible. I wasn't alone here, but no one heard me. Someone tried to help me, but they silenced them too. Emily H. Karen fell to her knees. She picked up the notebook. The handwriting was the same, but this piece wasn't on any of the pages, as if the page had been deliberately hidden or torn out by someone. At that moment, Karen's eyes fell to the glass, and in the midst of the glass was a word. It had been written with a finger. It hadn't been erased yet. Come back. By morning, Karen was no longer just a detective, she was a witness. Emily's writing had brought her not just to the center of a missing persons case, but to a mirror inside herself. She had recognized the silence, and now she was about to break it. First, she looked into Brad's record, the security guard who had gone on leave the morning he disappeared. The details were startling. According to an old hospital security report, another night shift nurse had left the hospital around the same time 4 years earlier. The record said left on leave, but she hadn't returned. Her name, Laura Mendez, and a notebook had been found in her locker too. On the cover was a single word, stay. Karen made the connection. This was not just Emily's story, but the silent story of many women, all on the night shift at the same hours with the same tracks, and behind them all the same emptiness. No one had spoken. Dear viewer, sometimes a notebook doesn't just tell a story. Sometimes a scream waits silently between the lines, and when someone reads it, silence is no longer silence. Have you ever felt that a word has changed you? Write it in the comments. Because this story is not only Emily's, it is the story of everyone whose voice is not heard. Brad was arrested. He didn't speak during the interrogation, but in the basement of the hospital, in the attic of an old office, 3 separate notebooks were found. They belonged to 3 women. They all belonged to different years, but they had disappeared at the same time. They had all silently asked for help, and now they had all been heard. Emily still couldn't be found, but her notebook, her story, and the sentences she left behind are no longer lost. Karen had Emily's last page framed. She hung it on the most invisible wall of the hospital. She left a note next to it. It's not the ones who are lost, but the ones who are silenced that change us. When we hear them, we find ourselves too. And at that moment, Emily stopped being just a lost nurse. It had a voice, and it left an impact. As we read this story, we saw not just a disappearance, but how a voice returned. If you have something you've been holding back, you're not alone. Leave your own silence in the comments and subscribe. Because we don't just tell the stories here, we remind the unremembered.